Okay, so you're saying cease the emotion, try to think logically, and look at in this context, a geopolitical or some sort of strategy perspective or lens to see, is what I'm looking at really even like does it make sense? Does it have some validity?
And you might emotionally want something to make sense. Like I know that you heard me on the Danny Jones podcast. So one of the things that made a lot of people mad was when I said there's no such thing as a military-industrial complex. Oh my goodness, people lost their minds when I said that. But if you look at where things are today versus where they were in 1990 versus where they were in the 1950s, Eisenhower gave a speech. I believe it was his farewell address in 1961, where he warned America of what he called the military-industrial complex, which are these military companies that were kind of influencing government policy. And that might have been the case back in the 1950s. But by 1990, what did we get? BRAC, Base Realignment and Closure Commission. So we're closing bases left and right because it was after the first Gulf War. Russia was defeated. We're like, what do we do with this big army? Shut it down. So we started shutting down bases. We started drawing down equipment. We bought less equipment. And now we're down to basically 2 shipbuilders. There's only 2 companies that actually build military ships and 5 total defense contractors in aerospace. So what we had back in even the 1990s isn't really there anymore. And when you look at something like the profit of Lockheed Martin, which I believe was $6.7 billion, whereas Apple makes $97 billion a year. Well, what business do you want to be in? You want to be in the business of selling phones or weapon systems? But the military-industrial complex, it's so ingrained in our consciousness that we have a very hard time letting go of that.
Is it outdated? Has it shifted into something more maybe cyber?
I mean, I think that one of the differences is what was it called, NCAA or NRAA, the National Readiness. I can't remember the darn acronym. One of the things that we do have is lobbyists from some of the defense contractors do help write some of our policy when it comes to things like parity. Like we must have 11 aircraft carriers. We must maintain a certain kind of dominance with China or parity with China on jet fighters or whatever. But when you look at that, you go like, well, who would be better to answer that question other than the people who work for the freaking company? Right? There's a reason why you have pharmaceutical sales reps. Like, yeah, they're there to peddle drugs, but they're also there to educate the doctor. Like, hey, you take this thing once a day, it'll prevent your patients from spontaneous decapitation, right? Which I hear is really bad. Like Hexagon. If you take Hexagon once a day, you'll prevent spontaneous decapitation. Like side effects may include your limbs falling off. But you kind of get the idea there, right? Like it might not be a bad idea to have experts. And if you don't think experts are good at what they do, hopefully you never need an expert witness at a court trial, right? Sometimes there's a reason why you have experts. So I would say another thing would be to avoid that entrenched thinking.